السنة مثل سفينة نوح، من ركبها نجا ومن تركها غرق.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله، وكفى بالله شهيدا، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. As to what precedes, أبنائي وبناتي وإخواني وأخواتي ويا معشر الطلاب، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
With regards to studying the book Madhhab of the al-Hadith by Shaykh al-Islam of his time, Abu al-Wafa ThanāʻAllāh Amritsarī rahmatullah. Studying the issue of al-ghayb, knowledge of the unseen, which is a fundamental difference between us and the other deviated groups. وَعَلَى رَأْسِهِمْ, from amongst them, those who have championed this belief of Kufr and Shirk are the Rāfidah, and then the Sufiyya, and then from amongst the Sufiyya, the offshoot of the Barelvis and the Deobandis. Like I mentioned, that the only difference between the Deobandis and the Barelvis with regards to al-ghayb is that the Deobandis agree with the al-Hadith on the issue of al-ghayb theoretically. But when it comes to the practical and the implementation of adhering to such beliefs, which can be found in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, we find that they unite with the Barelvis. And I quoted some examples last week in our previous lesson. So because of the tasawwuf or the Sufism, we find that the Deobandis, regardless of whether they belong to the Hayati or the Mamati offshoot, with regards to such issues, then because of their elders being part of the strong Sufi cult, practically they unite with the Barelvis and there is no difference between them. This fine difference is a very important difference which you will not find anywhere written in the books by the scholars. It is something which a talib al-ilm, after tatabbu wal-istiqra', reading the books, can tell you the difference. That if somebody was to tell you that so-and-so Deobandi scholar wrote a refutation of the Barelvis with regards to al-ghayb, then the answer to that would be that theoretically they agree with us, but practically, and i'tiqadan, in belief, they have a position which is opposite to what they claim to believe. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. With regards to this issue of al-ghayb, I think we've covered 7 issues. And it must be known to the students that the issue of al-ghayb is an issue of kufr and shirk. That if somebody does not believe in the issue of al-ghayb, as it has been mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah, then that person is upon kufr and shirk. And if somebody is upon kufr and shirk, then it is not permissible for you to pray behind such a person. This is how serious this matter is. Many people accuse me of being harsh. Many people accuse me of being extreme. when it comes to such issues. But the reality is that all those who make those claims, the claimants of these claims, none of them have made dirasa of these issues riwayatan wa dirayatan that I know of. They're all speaking based upon their ignorance and not knowing the actual issue, which needs to be studied with the ulama. Ala kulli hal, in our previous lesson, I mentioned with regards to al-Kashf. I mentioned al-Kashf, and I gave you the definition of al-Kashf. Usually they translate al-Kashf or Kashf, like they say in the Urdu language, Kashf or Kashf, as intuition. Al-Kashf, barakallahu feekum, as mentioned by al-Jurjani, al-Hanafi, who died in the year 1816. And this is a book which is very important to get, Kitabu Ta'rifat. It's a book of definitions. It gives you the definitions of all the terminologies that can be found within the Sharia, from Aqidah to Usul al-Fiqh to Fiqh to Tasawwuf to Ilm al-Kalam, Falsafa. It is a book which the ulama refer back to in terms of al-Lugha, Arabic language, of al-Jurjani, Kitab al-Ta'rifat. So it's been mentioned by al-Jurjani al-Hanafi, who died in the year 1816 after Hijrah. Al-Kashf, which is concealed and hidden from the occult and unknown issues and hidden affairs that either would have been known by them being present or witnessed. So al-Kashf is to acquaint some form of information or knowledge or news which would have only been possible if you were present or you witnessed such issues. This is with regards to al-Kashf. I mentioned another definition as well last week with regards to al-Kashf, and I mentioned that al-Kashf al-Sufi, as mentioned by al-Tabaqat al-Sufiyya by Abu Abdurrahman Muhammad al-Sulami, he mentioned the definition of al-Kashf as understood by the Sufis. Al-Kashf, as defined by Abdurrahman Muhammad al-Sulami, author of al-Tabaqat al-Sufiyya, he says that Kashf is al-Mushahadat lil-Qulub al-Mukashifat lil-Asrar wal-Mu'ayanat lil-Basair wal-Mura'at lil-Absar. The al-Kashf is the witnessing of the hearts, unveiling of the hidden issues, or those issues that would only be known with firm insight knowledge, visually, and the insight of those issues perceptibly. This is what Sulami mentioned in the Tabaqat al-Sufiyya. One of the great Deobandi scholars of this time was alive, who is known as Mufti Abdul Rashid. And when we quote him on being as a Mufti, then we only call him by this name which has been given to him, or this title which has been given to him by the Deobandis. Otherwise, we don't acknowledge him to be a Mufti. Just like Ismail Menk, everybody calls him Mufti, then this word is an insult, or this title is an insult when it is attached to the likes of Ismail Menk. Because Ismail Menk is not even a qualified Mufti according to the criteria of the Deobandis. Because when we researched on this issue and when we sent a letter where he claimed to study Darul Ifta, they denied that such a man by such a name had ever studied and had become a Mufti at their premises, which is a madrasa in Baruch known as Darul Qantariya. And when we researched on that issue and study, I personally sent somebody to inquire. They denied that a man by that name had ever studied and was given or granted a certificate to give fatwa based upon the Deobandi Mazhab. Ala kulli hal, these titles which we quote are mentioned in inverted commas. So Abdul Rashid Deobandi, the Mufti, mentions that the people, experts with regards to Kashf, they mention that most of the people that claim to have Kashf are those who are aghbiyas and mental people. And he also mentions that Kashf is not clearly a hujjah, or something which can be taken as proof and evidence. And as we know that the Sufis, they take Kashf as a hujjah. They take Kashf as a hujjah and as a proof in which they adhere to in their religion. The one Ilham. Jurjani al-Hanafi, once again in his Ta'rifat, he gave the definition of al-Ilham. And we said that the correct translation for al-Ilham in the English language, we can say, is intuition, but not for Kashf. Because when we look at the definition of al-Kashf, and then when we look at the meaning of intuition in the English language, then it is not correct to say that intuition is the correct translation for al-Kashf. Because al-Kashf is to claim to have knowledge of the unseen. And this is the fundamental reason that I told you that although the Deobandis say theoretically in the Quran that, and in the Sunnah, that ilm al-ghayb is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because they believe in Sufism and they fundamentally believe in al-Kashf. And al-Kashf is a strong component for the Deobandis. Therefore, practically and in belief, they go against the concept of ilm al-ghayb as mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. They believe till this day that all their buzrugs, like they say, buzrug is somebody who they call elderly or a pious man, is that they can see the sins of the people whilst they are making wudu, etc. And what they do is they mix up the definition of al-Kashf and al-Ilham, and by doing so they deceive the people and say, what we mean by Kashf is al-Ilham, and al-Ilham is something which is established. Everybody from amongst Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, everybody from the al-Hadith believes in al-Ilham. So the next question is what is the definition of al-Ilham? Intuition. Al-Jurjani rahimahullah mentioned, he said that ma yulqa fi ar-ra'i bi tariq al-fayd, that intuition is that which enters the heart by the way of an overwhelming innate of state or condition of Sufi knowledge, innate Sufi knowledge. And the other definition he said ma waqa'a fil qalbi min ilm. So he says وهو يدعو إلى العمل من غير استدلال بآية. That this knowledge, that this state or condition, this intuition, state of condition which is acquired, or this knowledge which is acquired, it inspires the person to act upon it. And I gave you the example of Bukhari, with regards to al-Jami al-Musnad, according to Jurjani, said min ghairi ayah. So there is no ayah, evidence using any form of ayah, وَلَا نَظَرَ فِي حُجَّةٍ, and there is no proof for this. And he says, وَهُوَ لَيْسَ بِحُجَّةٍ عِنْدَ الْعُلَمَاءِ, that Ilham is not a hujjah according to the scholars. So Jurjani is admitting that al-Ilham is not hujjah. Al-Ilham is something which Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah believe in. So if al-Ilham is not a hujjah, then something which is innovated like al-Kashf can also not be a hujjah. He says the only people who take al-Ilham as a hujjah are the Sufis. Do we understand the difference between al-Ilham and al-Kashf? Do the students understand the difference between al-Ilham and al-Kashf? Al-Ilham is something which is not contrary, cannot be something which is contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah. That's the first difference that we see. The second thing that we say is that al-Ilham is something which enters the heart and is based upon knowledge. That knowledge is in accordance to the Quran and Sunnah. Whereas al-Kashf is something which means that you know something of the knowledge of the unseen, which could have only been known to you by witnessing or being present there. واضح؟
نعم شيخ واضح.
Is that clear?
نعم.
And according to only the Sufis, as when al-Jurjani mentioned that only the Sufis hold al-Ilham to be al-Hujjah, then that could either mean ma yulqa fi ra'i bi tariq al-fayd, that which enters the heart. Ra' is the heart. And this definition of al-Ilham is very close to being mutaradif to what we say with regards to al-Kashf. That's why we find sometimes the ulama, some of these words interchangeably, and by Ilham they mean Kashf, and by Kashf they mean al-Ilham, but this requires further investigation. That if by al-Kashf is al-Ilham, what is meant by al-Kashf is al-Ilham, then we believe in this. But then it's always like we say that at-taqayyud, to restrict yourself with a terminology which can be found in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or by the Salafus Salih is something which is highly recommended. Then I mentioned to you that Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafasana al-Amritsarī rahmatullah alayhi wrote a risala called Risalatul al-Ilham, refuting one of the Hindus with regards to the correct concept of al-Ilham, which can be found in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I showed you this risala last week on our previous lesson. Do we understand the difference between al-Ilham and al-Kashf? Do the students understand the difference with al-Ilham and al-Kashf? Al-Ilham is something which is not contrary, cannot be something which is contrary to the Quran and the Sunnah. That's the first difference that we see. The second thing that we say is that al-Ilham is something which enters the heart and is based upon knowledge. That knowledge is in accordance to the Quran and the Sunnah. Whereas al-Kashf is something which means that you know something of the knowledge of the unseen, which could have only been known to you by witnessing or being present there. واضح?
نعم شيخ واضح.
Is that clear?
نعم.
And according to only the Sufis, as when al-Jurjani mentioned that only the Sufis hold al-Ilham to be al-Hujjah, then that could either mean ma yulqa fi ra'i bi tariq al-fayzi, that which enters the heart. Ra' is the heart. And this definition of al-Ilham is very close to being mutaradif to what we say with regards to al-Kashf. That's why we find sometimes the ulama, some of these words interchangeably, and by Ilham they mean Kashf, and by Kashf they mean al-Ilham, but this requires further investigation. That if by al-Kashf is al-Ilham, what is meant by al-Kashf is al-Ilham, then we believe in this. But then it's always like we say that at-taqayyud, to restrict yourself with a terminology which can be found in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or by the Salafus Salih is something which is highly recommended. Then I mentioned to you that Shaykh al-Islam al-Wafasana al-Amritsarī rahmatullah alayhi wrote a risala called Risalatul al-Ilham, refuting one of the Hindus with regards to the correct concept of al-Ilham, which can be found in the book of Allah and the Sunnah of Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I showed you this risala last week on our previous lesson. Does everybody remember the books that I showed you last week? No. I went out on my way, going through my library and picking out certain books to show you students of some of the knowledge and some of the efforts that scholars have made with regards to writing the issue of al-ghayb.
No,
if it was the students of knowledge that attended this lesson, فَبِهَا وَنِعْمَةً, because it took me years and years to collect such books and to read such books. And I'm pretty sure that in the whole of England, and I don't say this by boasting or by in any pride, and Allah is a witness to what I say, but out of happiness and out of the recommendation and the gratitude and the appreciation that I got from the scholars with regards to going out of my way of collecting such books, which were easily shown to you last week in the previous lesson. And like I said, for those who missed out last week's lesson, then they missed out in having great knowledge with regards to the books that have been written on this subject. Now with regards to the issue of so now that the word al-Kashf sometimes can be referred to al-Ilham. So whenever you have a discussion with a Sufi with regards to Kashf and al-Ilham, so he may refer to al-Ilham as, so ask him the definition of al-Kashf. Ask him the definition of, and then after the definition has been determined, then start your discussion. Is that clear? It's very important.
No.
So you need to understand the terminologies which are used. You need to know the definition. Like I said to you that many Sufis use Kashf for the definition of al-Ilham. As we saw Jurjani, the Jurjani himself, al-Hanafi, a scholar who died, was from the 9th century, 816 after Hijrah he died, that when he defined al-Ilham, one of his definitions of al-Ilham, which is very close to what the Sufis say explicit, but his indications showed towards that. And then he said waqila, and then he gave that definition, which is agreed upon by the al-Hadith and the scholars of Hadith and the scholars of al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. Now, is it clear so far what I have mentioned?
نعم شيخ واضح.
Now we have the issue of the famous statement of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. And you know, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu was giving his Friday khutbah on the minbar, and whilst he was on the minbar, there was a Muslim army that was dispatched under the command of Sariya. And whilst giving the Friday khutbah, he said, Ya Sariyatu al-Jabal, Sariya, go to the mountain. The Sufis try to use this to justify al-Kashf. Have any of you come across this narration? Ya Sariyatu al-Jabal. Ala kulli hal, this is a narration of, as we know, Ya Sariyatu al-Jabal. Umar ibn al-Khattab is in Medina giving the Friday khutbah in Masjid Nabawi. There's hundreds of Sahabas, companions, as well as the Tabi'een that are present there. And Sariya is somewhere away, hundreds of miles away. And Umar ibn Khattab says, Ya Sariyatu al-Jabala. And Sariya hears this and he takes respite in the mountains. First of all, with regards to where this narration can be found. So I'll give you some references where this narration can be found. This narration can be found in the Fawaid of Abu Bakr ibn Khallad. It can be found in the Fadail al-Sahaba of Imam Ahmad, which was edited by our Shaykh Wasil Abbas, which was his PhD thesis. It can be found by Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami in al-Arba'in al-Sufiyya. It can also be found by al-Bayhaqi in Dalail al-Nubuwah. It can also be found by Ibn Asakir in his Tarikh, Abu Nu'aym in his Dalail al-Nubuwah, al-Dhiya al-Maqdisi in his al-Mutlaq. It can also be found in al-Bidayah wa al-Nihaya of Ibn Kathir, al-Isaba of Ibn Hajar, etc. This narration can be found in many of the books of Hadith. Did you get some of the references right, which I quoted? From amongst them, the most famous is Dalail al-Nubuwah of al-Bayhaqi and Fadail al-Sahaba of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And obviously Ibn Asakir, his Tarikh, which is in 80 volumes.
Subhanallah.
You know that Ibn Asakir wrote a Tarikh in 80 volumes. Did the students know this?
لا شيء.
No? So here, let me show you.
Subhanallah.
The 80 volumes of Ibn Asakir. If you can see this from here, the red book, these 80 volumes.
Subhanallah.
So this is the Tarikh, known as Tarikh Dimashq of Ibn Asakir, 80 volumes. How many volumes is it?
80.
And this Tarikh is Musnad, it has asanid to everything that is mentioned. So you can, this is 80 volumes, a rare book to be found. This book has a very famous story that happened between me and my Shaykh. Shaykh Muhammad Mufti Muhammad al-Istadi rahmatullah alayhi. So this is with regards to Yasatul Jabala. Many of the references have been mentioned. Now with regards to the narration, then there have been many reports or many asanid or many chains of transmission that have been reported with regards to this incident that happened between Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu and Sari. from amongst the scholars who have authenticated this incident, then we have from amongst them Ibn al-Kathir, who after the incident, he said, هذا إسناد جيد حسن, that the isnad of this narration is hasan. Ibn Hajar in al-Isabah, he said, وإسناده حسن. Al-Haythami, Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, also in as-Sawā'iq, he said, وإسناده حسن. Shaykh Albani in Silsilatul Ahadith al-Sahiha said that this narration is sahih. Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah also holds this narration of this incident to be authentic. Shaykh Abdul Aziz bin Baz rahmatullah alayhi also holds this incident to be sahih, and he authenticated this athar or this narration. Also Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he also held this narration to be authentic. So with regards to the authenticity of this narration, then I have quoted to you many scholars from the past and the present, and from the scholars of Ahl-Sunnah, who say that this narration is sahih. Am I making any sense so far?
No, I'm sorry.
With regards to Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, then Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan, he believed that the narration was authentic, and I believe that this was his older position, but now he is of the opinion narration is not authentic. طيب?
No.
So there are amongst many scholars of the past who have argued and have declared this narration to be weak. And they are, and from them the contemporary great scholars such as the Shaykh Albani, Shaykh bin Baz, Shaykh Uthaymeen, that held this narration to be sahih. So those scholars who don't say it's authentic, even if you were to argue hypothetically speaking, and even if they were to accept it to be authentic, then this would not change anything with regards to their belief. Because some people may argue this and say, well, only some of the scholars only want to discredit this narration or declare it or verify it to be unauthentic because they want to deny the concept of al-Kashf. This is an argument which is warid and which is presented by the Sufis, saying that the Salafis only say that this narration is not authentic because they want to run away and they want to deny. I said, am I making any sense to the students of knowledge? But regardless of whether we authenticate this narration or we do not authenticate this narration, the Sufis have no argument against Ahl-Sunnah.
No.
Or the Ahl-Hadith.
No.
It won't make a difference. The Sufis argue that the only reason the Salafis deny this narration is that this narration, if they accept it, then they will have to accept the concept of al-Kashf, which is not the case. Do we understand the argument?
No.
Is the argument clear?
No. No.
In response, we say that some of the scholars have argued that the statement of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, Ya Sariyatu al-Jabala, has been narrated with many chains of transmission, many asanid. So the first thing you need to understand is that I quoted some of the books, the references. This incident has been narrated with many, many different chains of transmission, with many different routes. All of these chains of transmission do not reach the level of them strengthening one another. When you have different chains of transmission, sometimes these different chains of transmission can strengthen one another. This is known as injimam. Muhaddithin call this injibaq. But the scholars of those who say that this narration is not authentic, they say that all the asanid either have narrators which are kadhab, liars, or matruq, which are bad. All of them, all the narrations, except for one narration, one chain of transmission, which has been narrated on the authority of Ibn Ajlan from Yahya ibn Ayyub. All the other transmissions are all as though they did not exist. The only debate and discussion amongst the muhaddithin is the narration of Ibn Ajlan. And even that has some form of kalam, or some form of criticism in it. What is this criticism that some scholars say? They say, number one, that Ibn Ajlan, the problem with the narration of Ibn Ajlan, which is the only chain of transmission where an argument remains, is that Ibn Ajlan is alone in reporting this incident. Tafarrud. Because of him being alone. How can it be so that such a great incident took place in a public place on a Friday in the Prophet ﷺ's masjid, whilst Umar ibn Khattab was giving the Friday khutbah on the mimbar, and only one person has narrated this to us? Do we understand the argument?
Naam, Shaykh.
The second thing is, as we know that this narration is from Abdullah ibn Umar. And we know that Abdullah ibn Umar, the one who reports from Abdullah ibn Umar, is Nafi, the student of Abdullah ibn Umar. Al-Uqayli, one of the great scholars of the past, he says that all the narrations of Ibn Ajlan that come from Nafi and Ibn Umar are muttarib, are problematic. When Ibn Ajlan is the only one that narrates from Nafi. When Ibn Ajlan narrates from Nafi by himself, then this narration is considered to be muttarib. Number three, that this is an incident that happened which was abnormal. It's not a normal incident. For Umar ibn Khattab to be giving the Friday khutbah and to change topic suddenly in the presence of everybody, and then to shout out and say, Ya Sariyatu al-Jabal. So there was a possibility of hundreds of people witnessing this, of it being tawatur. That so many people must have witnessed this when Umar ibn Khattab said this. Just like we have the incident of tawassul of Ibn Abbas after the death of the Prophet ﷺ in Hadith Sahih Bukhari for the rain prayer. So many companions witnessed this in the very same way. So how can it be so that only one person, authentic, it only has reached us through one person, when there was a possibility of it being mutawatir? So many people narrating. Number four, Ibn Umar and Nafi. We know that Ibn Umar was from Mukthirin fil Hadith. He was from Minal Mukthirin fil Hadith. He was from amongst those companions that narrated the most narrations from the Prophet ﷺ. And we know that his student Nafi was from amongst those students of Ibn Umar that narrated the most of the narrations. Thousands of narrations. And both of them had hundreds of students. So how can it be so that if Nafi was the only one who narrated this from Ibn Umar, whereas Ibn Umar had hundreds of students? And how can it be so that Ibn Ajlan was the only one narrating from Nafi when Nafi had hundreds of students? When this was done publicly on a Friday in the Prophet's masjid whilst the khutbah. Based upon this, some of the scholars, these are the arguments that the scholars who say that this incident is problematic. And therefore, when somebody asks you a question with regards to the narration of Ya Sariyatul Jabal, and you want to give an answer just like the scholars give an answer, not saying it's authentic or not saying it's not authentic. And see the greatness and the smartness and the intelligence of scholars. Many of the scholars have said that al-asanidu kulluha la takhlu min al-kalam. That every single sanad that has reached us with regards to this incident, that no sanad is free from any form of defect. And they stop. Although many of the scholars have authenticated this narration based on the narration of Ibn Ajlan, as we know and we find the scholars. So ala kulli hal, whatever position is being taken, that this incident has been reported by many asanid with different wordings, many wordings which are rejected. The only wording that is accepted is the asariyatu al-jabla. That's it. Nothing else from this narration is accepted. The scholars only authenticated from those scholars who authenticated this when Umar ibn al-Khattab said Yasariyatu al-Jabal. That's it, nothing else. Is that what? Regardless of whether you okay or you, it doesn't make it. And these are the reasons why the scholars have given. 5 reasons the scholars have given. First of all, the belief of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, or the belief of that, is that the calling of up on the mimbar Friday, and when he said Yasariyatu al-Jabla, this was from al-Ilham. This was Ilham from. Is it clear?
نعم شيخ.
Was it Ilham, not Kashf? Go back to our definitions of where we made clear distinctions between al-Ilham and Kashf. Secondly, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu did not know what was happening, and he did not witness what happened between the two armies. As he was on his mimbar, he said, Yasariyatu al-Jabla. And then after that, he did not know what happened. Third important point, which destroys the argument of al-Kashf, is that this is from the miracles. Amatun min al-karamat wa waliyun min awliya'illah. That this action of Umar ibn al-Khattab to say Yasariyatu al-Jabla is ilham. And these type of things can happen in miracles. As we know, a miracle is an extraordinary act. An act which cannot be done, it is done with the aid and assistance of Allah. Miracles, according to Ahlul Sunnah, miracles happen unexpectedly. So Ahlul Sunnah, they believe in Allah. If Allah wants him to do a miracle, then he himself will not know that this miracle is going to happen. Whereas the Sufis, they walis, they will say, everybody watch me now, I'm going to walk on water. Who's that guy in London who locked himself up on the big London Eye for 40 days? When the karama happens, the wali does not know. It just happens. But when the wali says, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, like the magicians do, they know that he is from the awliya of the shaitan, not from the awliya of Allah. This is the dhabit. واضح?
نعم شيخ واضح.
Number 5, Umar ibn al-Khattab was the muhdith of this ummah. As it has been narrated in the 2 Sahihs, Bukhari and Muslim, وفي الصحيحين عن عمر أنه قال وافقت ربي في 3. قلت يا رسول الله لو اتخذت من مقام إبراهيم مصلى فنزل واتخذوا من مقام إبراهيم مصلى. وقلت يا رسول الله إن نساءك يدخل عليهن البر والفاجر فلو أمرتهن أن يحتجبن قال فنزلت آية الحجاب واجتمع على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نساءه غيره فقلت له أتكن أن يبدله أزواجا خيرا منكن فنزلت كذلك. He said, my Rabb agreed with me in three things. I said three things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala agreed with me. He said, I said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasulullah, I wish if we could take the place of Ibrahim as our praying place, Maqam Ibrahim, for some of our prayers. So came the divine revelation, came down in accordance with myself. And the ayah was taken, and take you people the place of Abraham as a place of prayer for some of your prayers. And as regards to the ayah of hijab, veiling of the woman, I said, O Allah's messenger, I wish you ordered your wives to cover themselves from men, because good and bad ones talk to them, meaning good and bad men are in contact with them. So the ayah of the veiling of the woman was revealed. And once the third incident, wives of the Prophet ﷺ made a united front against the Prophet. They made a united front against the Prophet based upon some worldly things that they want. And I said to them, I said to the wives of the Prophet, it may be if he, the Prophet, divorced you, all that his Rabb, Allah, will give him instead of you wives better than him. So the ayah was revealed. أزواجا خيرا منكن. The status of Umar ibn al-Khattab, that him, and he was a wali min awliya Allah. So a person, only the muhdith of this ummah was Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he was also mulham. So not every single person who's mulham is a muhdith, because the only muhdith that we have Umar ibn al-Khattab, that the muhdith of this ummah was Umar ibn al-Khattab, and he's passed away. Although Mirza Ahmad Ghulam Qadiani, the false impostor, claims that he's a muhdith as well, but he has been proven to be a liar. So Umar ibn al-Khattab was a muhdith. He was somebody who had ilham, and somebody, when this incident happened, when the armies returned back to Medina and Sariya returned, Umar ibn al-Khattab, he asked, what happened? Did Allah make us victorious, or were we defeated? He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, we were on the verge of being defeated, until I heard voice shouting out from nowhere, not knowing where it is. I heard this voice saying, Ya Sariya to al-Yaman. So we quickly hastened and hurried, took respite in the mountains, and we defeated our enemies. So this is to show that if this is considered to be al-Kashf, and al-Kashf means to know knowledge of the unseen, then how is it that the first part of the incident says that Umar ibn Khattab said, Ya Sariyatul Jabala, but he did not know whether the Muslims were victorious. So that goes against their own definition of al-Kashf. So this was not al-Kashf, this was ilham. This ilham was consisted of a karam. And not all the time, and when somebody is mulham, or when ilham happens to somebody, that the ilham is also part of a karam. Not all the case, not all the time. But in the case of Umar ibn Khattab, radiyallahu anhu, when he was mulham, and at his hands, upon his tongue, Allah manifested a miracle upon his tongue. Is that clear?
نعم شيخ.
So I gathered about 10 points with regards to the incident of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Yasariyatul Jabala, which we can benefit. The first is the status of a muhdith is greater, as that means his ilham is in accordance to the revelation. That the al-Khattab, being the muhdith of this ummah, is such that his ilham is in accordance to revelation afterwards. Ilham happens from Allah. If a person is upon the sunnah, muttabi'u sunnah, and ilham happens to him, then this is from Allah. If a person is upon bid'ah and innovation, then this ilham is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's wahi from the shaitan. Number 3, that this is not kashf. As kashf is to claim to know the knowledge of the unseen, whereas this was ilham with the miracle of Allah. Number 4, this is known by distinguishing a person, the person of bid'ah shirk. Whenever you see a person of bid'ah shirk claiming that he has ilham, then know that it is not ilham, it is wahi from shaitan. And whenever you know that something extraordinary was to happen to a person of the sunnah, then know that this was ilham from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 5, Umar himself did not know what happened until the army reached back to Medina safely and told him that they heard a voice shouting and was saved by Allah and victorious. Number 6, the Sufis use this to justify the knowledge of the unseen by saying that this was kashf. We say that this was not kashf, we say that this was ilham with a karam. Number 7, kashf is related to knowledge of the unseen always, unveiling and knowing things, whereas ilham is not. Number 8, this incident was ilham and a miracle, and it had nothing to do with the knowledge of the unseen. This is one, because Umar ibn Khattab did not know what happened to the army. Knowing knowledge of the unseen. Evidence is Umar himself did not know the outcome of what happened between the two armies. Number 9, this incident of Umar ibn al-Khattab, if we consider it to be authentic, as it is authenticated by many of the scholars, then this is a proof in our favor supporting ilham and karama, and it is a proof against kashf, because there was nothing that is related to the knowledge of the unseen that Umar ibn Khattab did. Number 10, the Sufis deceived the people by making kashf ilham and ilham kashf as one, whereas the Deobandis and Barelvis strongly believe in kashf. And kashf is related to al-ghayb, and something which is related to al-ghayb, kashf is something in simple words. Understand that kashf is to justify somebody knowing knowledge of the unseen, sugarcoating it nicely by using such incidents to deceive the people. So by this, we cover the narration of al-Jabala. Is that clear?
نعم شيخ.
Now with regards to al-Firāsa or al-Firāsa. Firāsa we say in Urdu, Firāsa. Firāsa in the Arabic language means at-tathabbut wal-nadhar. To be certain and to verify. An-nadhar, to contemplate. This is what al-Firāsa means in the Arabic language. At-tathabbut wal-nadhar. As mentioned in Lisan al-Arab, al-Mukhtar al-Sihha, Taj al-Urus. Technically, al-Firāsa علم تتعرف منه أخلاق الإنسان. It is a discipline through which the akhlaq or the manners, ethics of being min hayatihi, of regarding of this human being, mizajihi, his attitude, his mood, wa tawabi'ihi, how he moves about and etc. Wa hasiluhu, al-istidlalu bil-khalq al-zahiri ala al-khalq al-batin. Meaning, to sum this up, technically al-Firāsa means that you contemplate and you see the characteristic of a person, and based upon his external characteristic, you give a ruling and say what his internal characteristic will be like. This has been mentioned in the Kashf of Istilahat al-Funun wal-Ulum of al-Tanwi. Al-Tanwi has mentioned this. This is another very important book with regards to terminologies. It is also said that al-Firāsa هي الاستدلال بالأمور الظاهرة على الأمور الخفية. That it is to determine the hidden affairs or condition of a person based upon what you see apparently in front of you. So sometimes you may see a person, the way he moves, conniving, and you say, you know what? This guy, man, he's a cheat. Hustling around, moving around. But this, sir, is only given or practiced by people who have been granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to know such things. Not every single person can have Firāsa. I mentioned this because somebody asked a question last week with regards to al-Firāsa, so I said that I will talk about al-Firāsa. The difference between Firāsa and Ilham. Mullah Ali Qari al-Hanafi, a scholar from the 10th century, he says the difference between al-Firāsa and al-Ilham is that Firāsa is when you unveil affairs related which are hidden to you, practicing Firāsa, meaning apparently you get to know the condition of a person which is hidden and concealed by contemplating and analyzing his external position. Whereas Ilham is something which is done without basing it upon the external condition of a person. It's without a wasita. It's direct from Allah. Is that clear?
نعم شيخ
The difference
واضح.
between Ilham and al-Firāsa.
نعم شيخ واضح.
The next issue, while we're still on the seventh issue, is that what's the difference between al-ghayb al-Nisfi or al-Idafi and the two categories of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq, which we took last week. Remember, I mentioned to you that al-ghayb al-Mutlaq has two categories. The first category is only for Allah. The second category is something which can be for other than Allah, which Allah may reveal to His chosen slaves. So what's the difference between the two? Ala kulli hal, first thing understand is that al-ghayb al-Nisfi or al-Idafi is between the creation. Al-ghayb al-Nisfi or al-Idafi is between the creation, between the khalq of Allah. And what it means is al-ghayb al-Nisfi is that which is known to some of the creation and unknown to others. So if somebody from amongst the creation knows something and the other does not know, then this is al-ghayb al-Nisfi for him, or al-Idafi. Meaning that that person who does not know, he can acquire that knowledge. Understand? He can acquire that knowledge. Which means that anybody can come to know about it, or he may acquire its knowledge in this world by adopting and utilizing the sources that are available through technology. For example, when a crime is committed, the CCTV, for us. But we did not know of this crime, we did not see it. So we had no knowledge of it. But once the CCTV came to us and we watched the crime happen, then this was no longer al-ghayb for us. Until then, it was al-ghayb al-Nisfi. So this is not for some. So al-ghayb al-Nisfi, or having knowledge of something, is not specific to a group of people or specific for someone, just like the prophets and the messengers. Anybody can have knowledge of al-ghayb if it's al-ghayb al-Nisfi. Whether he's an alim or a jahil, whether he's a Muslim or a kafir. Whereas the second category of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq, specifically for a group of people, and specifically that knowledge which is granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it cannot be known except through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is it clear now the difference between al-ghayb al-Nisfi or al-Idafi and the second category of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq?
No, Sheikh.
So the category of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq is something which is bestowed and granted by Allah to His chosen slaves, meaning the prophets. Whereas al-ghayb al-Nisfi is between the creation. Some part of the creation know and some don't. With regards to the Shaykh rahmatullah alayhi, going back to the book now, then the Shaykh rahimahullah, he mentioned some references in his book to point out that the Prophet ﷺ did not have knowledge of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq, the first category, which was specifically for Allah. And he gave the example of the Qissatul Ifk of al-Mu'mineen Siddiqa bint Siddiq radiyallahu anhuma Aisha. That when the incident of the slandering and the accusations were made about Aisha, the Prophet ﷺ did not know the reality of what was true or false until revelation came down to him. As you can find in Sahih al-Bukhari and in Surah An-Nur. So this is the first thing to prove that the Prophet ﷺ did not have knowledge of the unseen. The second proof that the Shaykh gave from the Quran again is the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam in Surah Hud and Surah al-Dhariyat, when the guests that came to see Ibrahim alayhi salam did not know that they were angels. There was an angel that came. The third is also Lut alayhi salam, when the young boys came and he protected them from the fawahish that was practiced. He did not know that they were angels. Refer to Surah Al-Shura, Surah Al-Ankabut. Third. The fourth incident which the Shaykh mentioned is the Islam and Harun. Musa alayhi salam went to Tur and Allah spoke to him. And when he came back down, people had done, the first person that he interrogated strongly and harshly was his elder brother Harun alayhi salam. If he had knowledge of the unseen, that's the Quran with regards to prophets, including the Prophet ﷺ, Ibrahim and Musa, he did not know of the knowledge of the unseen. So they did not know the knowledge of the unseen. We can also add the story of Isa alayhi salam. When on the day of judgment, Allah will ask Isa alayhi salam with regards to what the people did by taking him as the son of Allah. Isa alayhi salam will say, how can I do such a thing which I have no knowledge with regards to? واضح؟
نعم شيخ واضح.
So these are some of this shows the intelligence of the Shaykh of picking out ayats of the Quran which clearly show that al-ghayb al-Mutlaq, the first category of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq is what the Shaykh is referring to, was only known to Allah. Nobody had that knowledge where it's explicit proof that only Allah had knowledge of such things. But Allah has no equal, no partner or no share for anybody with regard. If we believe that other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, somebody else has knowledge of this, then we have equaled Allah and that person or that being to Allah. Then what's specifically for Allah? Then we say that Ya Asha'ira, Ya Ash'ari, Ya Maturidi, Ya Jahmi, Ya Murji'i, you have committed the crime which you always accuse us of, anthropomorphism, by giving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His quality, His unique quality to somebody who has a limb and a body. So you have equaled somebody who has a limb and a body with such a quality to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you understand?
نعم شيخ.
Are the students following what I'm saying or not saying?
نعم شيخ.
And then the Shaykh, he gave evidence from 3 Hanafi scholars. 3 great Hanafi scholars. The first Hanafi scholar is a scholar by the name of Qazi Khan al-Hanafi. His fatawa are known as Fatawa Qazi Khan from the 5th century. And he has in his fatawa a chapter heading saying, Abu ma yakun ma la yakun. Chapter with regards to what will be considered to be an act of kufr from a Muslim and what will not be considered to be an act of kufr. And then he makes Allah clear. He says, بغير شهود فقال الرجل والمرأة الله ورسوله يشهد يكون كفرا لأنه اعتقد أن الرسول يعلم الغيب وهو ما كان يعلم الغيب حين كان في الأحياء فكيف بعد الموت. So he brings a mas'ala of fiqh and he connects the mas'ala of fiqh to the mas'ala of aqeedah. So Qadi Khan says, he says, so for example, you have a man that gets married without any witnesses. So a man and a woman, they get married. They decide that they want to get married to one another. So they get married. But they have no witnesses for the marriage. We know that you need 2 witnesses for a marriage. So this man and woman have no witnesses. So the man and woman, what do they say? They say Allah is our witness and Allah's messenger is our witness. Allah and Allah's messenger are our witnesses that we are getting married. Qazi Khan says that this statement to say Allah and His messenger are witnesses, this is kufr. Because now this man and woman believe that the Prophet ﷺ knows the knowledge of the unseen. And the Prophet ﷺ did not know knowledge of the unseen when he was alive. So how can he know knowledge of the unseen when he has passed away? Mullah Ali Qari al-Hanafi, scholar from the 11th century, when explaining the book of Aqidah for the Hanafis known as al-Fiqh al-Akbar, which is disputed whether this book can be ascribed to Abu Hanifa or not. Ala kulli hal, Mullah Ali Qari accepts it to be a book of Aqidah ascribed to Abu Hanifa. He says, explaining, he says, وَأَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يَعْلَمُوا الْمَغِيبَاتِ مِنَ الْأَشْيَاءِ إِلَّا مَا أعلمهم الله تعالى أحيانا. وذكر الحنفية تصريحا بالتكفير باعتقاد أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعلم الغيب، لمعارضة قوله تعالى قل لا يعلم من في السماوات والأرض الغيب إلا الله وما يشعرون أيان يبعثون. Explaining says, to the reader, says, and let it be known to you, O reader, that the prophets did not have knowledge of the unseen. They did not know anything from the unseen except that which Allah told them. Sometimes ما أعلمهم الله تعالى أحيانا is a proof from the words of Mullah Ali Qari al-Hanafi that al-ghayb al-Mutlaq has a second category, and Mullah Ali Qari affirms this by using the word ahyan. And then he says that the Hanafis are in agreement, and I've mentioned explicitly making takfir of that person who believes that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had knowledge of the unseen, because it's going opposing clearly with regards to this ayah where Allah says لا يعلم من في السماوات والأرض. Nobody knows what is in the heavens and the earth. Nobody has knowledge of the unseen of the heavens and the earth except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third scholar the Shaykh mentioned is Qazi ThanāʻAllāh Panipati, who died in the year 1225 after Hijrah, and he has written a book called Mala Bud in Farsi. When I was learning Farsi, I studied this book. And Qazi ThanāʻAllāh Panipati says, al-Hanafi says, if a man was to marry a woman and was to say that Allah and Allah's Messenger are witnesses, then this man has committed the act of Kufr. And then he referenced it back to Fatawa al-Qazi Khan. So these are references clearly which initiate to us and make it clear to us that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have knowledge of al-ghayb al-Mutlaq, and the issue of Kashf, al-Ilham, al-Firāsa, al-ghayb of what was known to them has been made clear to you, students of knowledge, with scholarly words written by the scholars, information and ilm, if you were to study at the Islamic University of Medina, and this is the type of knowledge that would be passed on to you. Now, wabillahi tawfiq, we stop here for today.